Huawei. Loved by many, hated by others. For better or worse, it is one of the companies that has innovated the most in the telecommunications and smartphones sector. How come Huawei has gotten so high? The man behind Huawei, its founder, Ren Zhengfei, had a vision in 1987. An idea: modernize the telecommunications in his country, which were obsolete and not very advanced. Ren, at that time, was the director of the Army for the Liberation of People in China, and had to buy equipment for other brands to reverse engineer them and thus be able to study their functions and manufacture, and then, from the learnings of this reverse engineer, make their own equipment and not depend on foreign companies. He wanted China to be able to manufacture its own equipment. General Jiang Zemin once said to Ren Zhengfei, "The country that is not capable of generating its own telecommunications infrastructure is practically a country without military power." Ren had a challenge: build a company to what is now the most loved company in China. Founded in 1987 by Ren Zhengfei in Guangdong, Shenzhen. It started in China, distributing PBX products to automatic private centrals for companies and governments. At that time, they didn't still manufacture its own equipment. Huawei basically was reselling third-party phone exchanges. 2 years later, he started the production of its own PBX. Their internationalization began in 1990, when Canadian telecommunications giant Northel hired Huawei to develop telecom products for them. In 1993, they launched its digital telephone switch, especially for rural areas. That's how it began to grow abysmally. Today, Huawei specializes in research and development. That's how they innovate themselves. In fact, annually, it invests 10% of its profits on it. It's 1996, and Beijing adopted the National First policy, naming Huawei as the official telecommunications provider for China and restricting access to other foreign companies. Huawei launched first GSM and CDMA products as well as fiber optics products. The characteristics of these equipments is that they were of an acceptable quality and very accessible in price. Ren knew that Huawei business was in telecommunications, in supplying large telephony companies and governments. In fact, he made a lot of profit this way, but Ren wanted to create products for the consumer, for people, something they could use every day. Ren dreamed of going global, but he needed help. He needed a business partner. And for this, in 1998, IBM took control over the management of the company and product development of Huawei. In 2001, thanks to these partnerships with other companies and with IBM, Huawei managed to take off globally. Huawei had a fairly accelerated growth, which began to attract the attention of other companies in all countries. Its economic power and control over telecommunications began to take on so much relevance that problems began. Its alliance with Siemens and Symantec reinforced their position within the telecommunications and security, but it was Symantec with whom had problems, as Huawei would buy all the shares of Symantec Alliance, leaving Symantec out of the game. This shady movement worried Symantec as Huawei granted access to cybersecurity secrets and potential threats relating to the US. In 2000, the United States alleged that Huawei installed telecommunications system in Iraq that may violate United Nations sanctions. Here, the US began pointing Huawei to espionage and unethical practices. Later, in 2003, Cisco Systems, an American telecommunications company, sued Huawei and its subsidiaries. Cisco claimed that Huawei purchased Cisco products, took them apart, analyzed and experimented with them in order to replicate them and sell with slight variations. This is known as reverse engineer. While this demand was developing in China, one of the largest and most lucrative markets in telecommunications, Huawei profits grew by 84%. Cisco lawsuit against Huawei was dissolved peacefully and Huawei agreed to make modifications to its equipment. Today, Cisco remains in China. It is a key market for them. By 2004, Huawei launched its first GSM terminal, the C300. Later, in 2005, the U626 was its first 3G phone. A year later, they presented their first mobile phone with Android, the U8 In 2013, they launched the Ascent 2 and the Ascent Mate and the Ascent P2. In 2013, the Ascent P6. It was the same year that they introduced their sister brand Honor. For 2014, Huawei launched the Ascent Mate 2 4G and its line of tablets, the MediaPad, as well as the Ascent G6 4G, the Ascent P7, the Ascent Mate 7, and the Ascent G7. And finally, in 2015, Huawei discontinued the Ascent model and renamed them as P series and Mate series respectively. The first in the P line was the Huawei P8, and the first in the Mate line was the Mate S. That year, Huawei and Google launched along the Nexus 6P in partnership, which was very controversial due to its questionable durability. Huawei's idea was to separate its two high-end phones, leaving the Mate series for a more premium user looking for the latest generation specifications and processor, like the Mate 30, and the P series for people who love photography. The P9 was the first Huawei with Leica cameras, until today with the P40. It's 2018. Huawei suffered a resounding blow not only to its reputation, but to its revenue. Ren finally achieved what every Asian brand dreams for the beginning, being able to sell to the American market. This involved officially entering the United States and with the support of a key partner. The Mate 10 Pro was ready to be launched by AT&T and was going to be announced at the CES 2018, but something happened. The United States Congress did not approve the partnership between Huawei and AT&T, as Huawei was considered a potential privacy-related problem and risk. The US Congress accused Huawei of espionage, as well as bringing benefits to the Chinese government. AT&T was forced to reject Huawei. Not having entered the American market for a brand would be a huge defeat, but it was not the case for Huawei. In fact, they sold 200 million smartphones in the world that year. It seemed that this was only a stroke to the pen for Huawei. But in December of that year, Meng Wanzhou, CFO of Huawei and daughter of Ren Zhengfei, was arrested at request for the United States. This occurred in Vancouver, Canada. She was accused of conspiracy against multiple international institutions, according to the New York court. She was later released after pay for release on bail of $10 million, but under conditions of house arrest, 24-hour surveillance, and the revocation of her Canadian passport. This case is still ongoing. The most recent controversy involving Huawei was the one triggered by 5G in 2019, and to this day is the one that affected Huawei the most. Huawei sales decreased since 2019, and they expect their sales to drop 20% more by 2020. It happened on a Sunday, May 19, 2019. Google was ordered to suspend commercial relationships with Huawei after the US government included them into the commercial blacklist. This implies that any American company is prohibited to provide software or hardware products to Huawei, and new smartphones will not come with Google services pre-installed. This affected Huawei so much that it temporarily halted smartphone production that month. Later, the United States Department of Commerce banned numerous United States companies from conducting business deals until further notice. Among those companies we have Intel, Qualcomm, Google, ARM, and Toshiba. These limitations imposed by the US limit or stopped the stock of electronic components that Huawei can use to manufacture its terminals. Microsoft was one of the companies that defended Huawei against these threats. Brad Smith, in charge of the company's legal area, maintained that the allegations to Huawei should be made under a proven base that appeals to the logic and evidence. Currently, in 2020, ARM, the Wi-Fi Alliance, and FedEx have resumed commercial relations with Huawei, which put Huawei at a full throttle again. Although Google doesn't have authorization to work with Huawei, we must understand that it is the United States government that does not allow Google and Huawei to certify new devices, although Google does want to continue work with them. Huawei's response to this was to reject all mobile applications from the Google ecosystem, including the Google Play Store, and create the Huawei mobile services ecosystem, Huawei proprietary environment that will completely replace every Google app, including the Google App Store, being replaced by App Gallery, the Huawei marketplace for mobile apps. Until today, there is much skepticism as to whether this new Huawei proposal really works, but time will tell. Huawei has more than 194,000 employees worldwide, and it has a presence in more than 170 countries. It has surpassed giants like Ericsson and Nokia, and even up today, they continues to fight to survive without losing his ideals. Keep fighting to do the impossible possible. Huawei has proven to be a thought rival to beat, and a company that emerged from nowhere to be everything to many people. This is Huawei.